Okay, so we're joined together again today. We're going to be in 2 Samuel. I think it's chapter 10. And it correlates with First Chronicles chapter 19. So depending, regardless of which thing you go into, there, at least for the first half of this, they're going to kind of mimic each other. With a few minor differences in detail. But we found out last week that David took care of the son of Saul, Mephibosheth, and made preparations for him to have a long and satisfying life with the former servants of Saul who agreed. We don't get any indication that they didn't like the idea because they didn't serve it anyway. But they agreed to do that, and Mephibosheth would be eating at the king's table for the rest of his life. So, and of course, we found out he had a child too. So, and then as as it was ending last week, we found out that David was expanding the kingdom in indirect ways, but there were some nations that came against him to attack, and he destroyed them. Some of them, he took lots of who would die and who wouldn't, like every other person would die, that kind of thing. And then there were some other nations who tried to take advantage of what was going on there to kind of blindside them. Well, that didn't work. God saved the day there. So we're going to find out how that continues on. And it's very interesting today how God works in David's life. And then when David turns away from God, or even that brief moment, we find what can happen when those kinds of things happen. So let's go ahead and let me start our share screen here so people at home can watch this later too. Okay, I can put it to presentation mode. There we go. Okay. So our 2 Samuel 10, verse 1. Sometime afterward, the king of the Ammonites died, and his son Hanun succeeded him. David said, I will deal loyally with Hanun, son of Nahash, just as his father dealt loyal with me. So David sent envoys to console him concerning his father. When David's envoys came into the land of the Ammonite, and of course I stopped that in the middle of a statement there, because this is not mentioned in Scripture. This the death of Nahash, or of a treaty with the Ammonites at any point. We haven't read anything. Nothing in Scripture documents that treaty that they made. Okay, so I stopped that there. So let me continue on. Sorry. So David sent envoys to console him concerning his father. When David's envoys came to the land of the Ammonites, the princes of the Ammonites said to the Lord Hanun, do you really think that David is honoring your father just because he has sent messengers with condolences to you? Has not David sent his envoys to you to search the city, to spy it out and overthrow it? So Hanun seized David's envoys, shaved off half the beard of each, cut off their garments in the middle of their hips, and sent them away. Now, to have a beard meant that you were a free person. It could also mean that you were clean, you were pure. So to shave off half of it was bad. Okay.
An insult.
Right. To shave off all of it would mean that you were in servitude, or that you were mourning. It could be a sign of mourning, severe mourning. But to have half of it shaved off means that you've got that person had to make the choice of what to do next. Would they shave it completely off, basically declaring to others that they were not free, or well, we'll find out what they did, which was to cut their garments was to show their nakedness, which was against the Levitical law anyway, against the moral code of the region.
So you're pure.
Well, right now I am. Till Karen forces me to shave it off, then I'm in servitude.
Michael, what you say? Talking about half the face, half the lips.
However it worked. I would think half the face. Yeah, it would be very visible.
Okay, so it's physical sense.
Oh, yeah. Karen walks by and says, soon, meaning, yeah, you're gonna be shaving that off soon. Nakedness for the Jews meant that they couldn't approach the altar for their sacrifices. So they've had their garments cut off of them, showing their nakedness. On to verse 1. Yeah, as soon as I can, there again. When David was told, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. The king said, remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. So in order to protect them from any embarrassment, he sends them on another mission to Jericho to await the growth of their beards. So this was the solution that he had. He sent them to a safe city, Jericho, in order for them to wait out, which could take weeks for their beard to come back. So for me, it's like 6 hours. Yeah, if I were to shave now by this evening, you would see stuff. My beard grows. That's why I don't like shaving. The military, I would have to shave like twice a day. And trust me, when I shave, when I get done, it looks like I murdered somebody. My face is very sensitive. The hair is very coarse. So I don't like to shave, although Karen hates them. Okay. So verse 6, when the Ammonites saw that David had become odious, or saw that they had become odious to David, I wonder why. The Ammonites sent and hired the Arameans of Beth Rehob and the Arameans of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers, as well as the king of Maacah, 1,000 men, and the men of Tob, 12,000 men. Now, over on the in First Chronicles 19, it says that Hanun he spent 1,000 talents of silver to hire these people, these mercenaries. They 32,000 chariots, as opposed to which doesn't mention any chariots over here on the left. And they camped before Medeba. They mustered from their cities and came to battle at Medeba. So they know what they've done to David is an act of war. They've already seen what's happened to some of the others, and why? If you know it's going to result in that, but they've gone too far. They didn't want to suffer the same embarrassment, so they hired an army to fight. Remember that David has this unique ability. Well, not a unique ability, I guess, but he has has at times done the same thing to people that they didn't. That he has returned. He's reciprocated the offense in kind. So before. So Medeba is way. You see the Dead Sea. That's the big sea, a big water thing right there. This is way to the south. You can see where it is. So it's on the other side. This is the Jordan River here. So it's way out here in the desert that they have. He sent. This up here is Jericho, right here. So he has sent somewhere, some in here. He has sent his envoys all the way to here, and then they've come back into Israel to wait there. They've gathered for battle over here, so that's probably where David has sent his troops to meet them. So verse 8, the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate of Medeba, that is. But the Arameans of Zobah and of Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. Now, this is a smart move because what they've done is the Ammonites who have done the offense, they're going to protect the city. They basically mustered all their troops at the front gate of the city, right out in front. Whereas all the people he's hired, they've sent out a couple of miles ahead of them to do all the fighting in the open country. Now, this is a smart move because David doesn't know exactly where they're at. He may come around in between them, and that's what they think. According to text, it seems to imply that David has come to the city, whereas the hired troops have gone kind of on a tangent. They've gone off on a flank. That way, when David's troops get there, they come around behind them and they trap them. There's no way for David and his troops to retreat. Okay. Although we're going to find, I keep saying David wasn't here. We'll find him. That's what leads into the Bathsheba thing. Right. Okay. that's when we get, in a few minutes, we're gonna read the Bathsheba story. Well, it was a time of war. David wasn't out with the troops, that's what's going on, okay? So verse 9, when Joab saw that the battle was set against him both in front and in the rear. You come on in, we haven't gotten too far. He chose some of the picked men of Israel and arrayed them against the Arameans. I wonder who those picked men.
Now, wait a minute. Go ahead, Tom. Okay.
So yeah, the whole Israel army has gone to Medeba, and the Ammonites who have hired the Arameans have come around behind. At least, like I said, it's what it's implied, and so Israel is trapped between the city of Medeba and the Ammonites and the hired people from Aram.
Wouldn't the picked men of Israel be the mighty men of David?
Right, picked men, probably the 30, probably those 30 people. And who was one of those 30 people? A guy by the name of Uriah. You're seeing the story come into play. Remember a few weeks, well, it's been probably 6 weeks or so. We read all those names of the 30, which came up to like 47. Right. Uriah was listed in that group. So, and he's a Gittite. That means he was from Gath. He was a Philistine. So, but he was a hired hand. Yeah. So we go here. The rest of his men he put in charge of his brother Abishai, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. He said, if the Arameans are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be strong and let us be courageous for the sake of our people and for the cities of our God. And may the Lord do what seems good to him. So Joab, he's figured out, you know what, they've trapped us. So let's send a group toward the city. Let's send a group, let's the rest of everybody's going to fight over here. Whoever succeeds in their battle, go help the other one. Now, there's no consideration if they're both losing. So that seems to indicate confidence. Joab is very confident. Abishai is his brother. Abishai was one of the mighty men too. And so this seems to indicate here that those picked men from before were not the 30. That he picks some select men to lead the rest of the army, or to lead the battle against the Ammonites. Whereas Abishai, who was one of the 30, he arrayed those to go against the Arameans. So Abishai was a leader. So Joab and the people who were with him moved forward into battle against the Arameans. That's the big group. That's the hired hands. And they fled before him. When the Ammonites saw that the Arameans fled, they likewise fled before Abishai and entered the city. Then Joab returned from fighting against the Ammonites and came to Jerusalem. So the battle was won before any sword was ever unsheathed. At least according, it doesn't mention any battles or anything. Scared them, right? Right. So no one wants to fight now. Okay, well, we'll just go home. But when the Arameans saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they gathered themselves together. Hadadezer, now he's the king. Remember, he had attacked David. He was the one who took advantage of David when he was battling the Edomites and them, okay? Hadadezer sent and brought out the Arameans who were beyond the Euphrates, and they came to Helam with Shobach, the commander of the army of Hadadezer, at their head. When it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and crossed the Jordan and came to Helam. The Arameans arrayed themselves against David and fought with him. So Hadadezer has, he realizes that, okay, well, the Israelite army's on the way home. I'm going to take all those hired hands that, the Ammonites, the people who the Ammonites hired, who have run off now, I'm going to get them to come help me. And that'll make my force even bigger. They were afraid to fight because they were afraid they were going to lose. But with my army, they're not, that can't happen. And so that's what's happened here. Hadadezer, again, being an opportunist, is taking it, he's taking advantage of the situation. And so now it's on. Now we mentioned earlier, I can't see that. Sorry. Walk over here. We had said, this is the Dead Sea down here. We talked about that. There's Medeba where they had originally. So that was, on the last map, it was up here somewhere. Here we are. This is where they're meeting now. Okay, so David has come around the Dead Sea. They're crossing. All those Arameans ran back. And so Hadadezer has gathered all these soldiers that have run away and they gathered them here. It has another name, Peniel.
Does it matter? I mean,
Oh, well,
I'm just so. Yeah, no.
I try to give you an idea of how far these soldiers walk. They didn't have cars or
That's a
anything.
long way.
Yeah, it comes to about 25 to 35 miles. So, and it's all desert if you look there, unless they crossed into the fertile area.
Still a long way to march.
Yeah, I've been on forced marches. That was in the army. We had to do 7 forced marches. You had to complete 5 of those 7, and each one got progressively longer. So the first one was like, if you didn't, you got recycled, what they call recycled into the next group, or you got removed from the military. Yeah, recycled into the next training class.
If you miss on your recycling, you get your toxic waste.
or you get discharged. So yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, anyway.
let's get through this.
So verse 18. She's ready to get to Bathsheba. Yeah.
This, I don't. David's gonna win.
Right. The Arameans fled before Israel, and David killed of the Arameans 700 chariot teams, 40,000 horsemen, and wounded Shobach, commander of their army, so that he died there. When all the kings who were servants of Hadadezer saw that they had been defeated by Israel, they made peace with Israel and became subject to them. So the Arameans were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore. Remember, the Ammonites started all this, and then when the armies of Israel came at them, they just ran back into their city, left the Arameans here. Correct. Yeah, there was never any battle. But the Ammonites started all this, and the Arameans are the ones who are paying for it. Right. So, okay, chapter 11. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel with him. They ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rome. So at some point, shortly thereafter, in the spring, David sends all of them to Hammon to fight who started all this. Okay. But David remained at Jerusalem. Now, I know a lot of ministers will say that, it was appropriate for the king to go out to battle. But there were times, especially when you had a kingdom that was prosperous, as David's was, that the king could stay home. He had trusted military. And so it wasn't necessary for him to go out. Of course, this could be David has gotten older. He's probably in his early to mid 40s at this point. And, he's got a kingdom to run. So regardless of how you think, you take it at face value, David wasn't with soldiers. So, okay. It never bodes well when the king decides, you know what, I think I'll let you do the dirty work while I allow to my double kings.
That's same. Exactly.
So this is where they went. There's just the Dead Sea back down here at the bottom left, and Medeba down there at the bottom center there. So give you an idea. The Peniel or
So what is the red dot?
that is where they've gone out to battle now. That's where they're meeting the Ammonites. Originally, they were down here in Medeba, down at the bottom, but this is where they've met them now. It happened late one afternoon when David rose from his couch and was walking about on the roof of the king's house that he saw from the roof a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. David sent someone to inquire about the woman. It was reported, this is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, sorry, not Hittite, the wife of Uriah the Hittite, sorry. He's not a Philistine. He's a Hittite, not a Hittite. So David sent messengers, see, I make mistakes too. So David sent messengers to get her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. Now she was purifying herself after her period. Then she returned to her house. The woman conceived, and she sent and told David, I am pregnant. There are so many things wrong with just these 4 verses. Where do we start? Lust, a form of pride, which in itself is a form of idolatry. Probably rape, definitely coerced. Lawfully unclean, which was against law. And he dismisses her. He just owns and don't. He got what he wanted.
But what was she doing bathing on the rooftop where everybody could see her?
Well, this is interesting. I actually, this was one of my, well, that,
No, I don't even think she did. I'm sorry. She doesn't maybe I don't think she realized. She's out there in, almost in public. I mean, anybody could have seen her.
If you hang around A&M for about 5 minutes, you understand the whole story.
during seminary, this was actually, had a discussion post on this where I made enemies very quickly because I brought this same point up. In that, we can't dismiss every possibility. I agree, it was probably rape, definitely coerced. Because here is a king, the leader of Israel, she didn't have a choice. But he's watching her from the top of the palace, watching her on her roof. So it had to be close enough that he could make out details, because she was beautiful. Remember, she's beautiful. So, so her place where she lived was close to the palace. Now, your status was based on how close you were to the king. And so I made the argument that when David sent these men to inquire of Bathsheba, remember, she is the wife of a hired mercenary. He's a Hittite, so he's hired. He's not an Israelite. So when David inquires, that she figures, oh, maybe now this is just just one of the possibilities. I could increase my status because I'm a foreigner here. I can increase my status by doing this. Oh, you should have seen the comments I got back. And I basically said, look, I agree with everything y'all are saying. I agree that that's what happened, but I cannot dismiss even the slightest possibility because we're reading this 3,500 years later. So anyway, that regardless of what happened, or regardless of what we think, we've got the basics of what happened. Okay. We'll find out. We find out tonight or tonight.
That's the rest.
Yeah, Paul Harvey. So David sent word to Joab, send me Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked how Joab and the people fared and how the war was going. Then David said to Uriah, go down to your house, wash your feet. There's that feet, okay? Now, means clean yourself. Make yourself ready. Uriah went out of the king's house, and there followed him a present from the king. But Uriah slept at the entrance of the king's house with all the servants of his lord and did not go down to his house. When they told David, Uriah did not go down to his house. David said to Uriah, you've just come from a journey. Why didn't you go down to your house? Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah remain in booths, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are camping in the open field. Shall I then go to my house to eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul lives, I will not do such a thing. He's loyal. He's a loyal soldier. He was hired for a purpose. And until he fulfills that purpose, he can't think of anything else. But yeah, feet here is probably, yeah. Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Not always, but in a lot of circumstances in the Old Testament, when they mention feet, that's what that means. Then David said to Uriah, remain here today also, and tomorrow I will send you back. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day. On the next day, David invited him to eat and drink in his presence and made him drunk. And in the evening, he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of his Lord, but he did not go down to his house. So how would you like to have that day? You get invited to eat and drink with the king, and y'all drink so much you get drunk. Get drunk in the king's presence.
He tried.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just mentioned, Uriah is loyal. He's got to complete the job. He can't let anything distract him.
Well, he can't take the easy life while his men and his.
Correct. He's one of the 30, and there's a reason for that. There's a reason. So, verse 14. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it by hands of Uriah. Now think about that. Uriah is carrying his own death. In the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting and then draw back from him so that he may be struck down and die.
That's pretty clear.
Yeah. As Joab was besieging the city, he assigned Uriah to the place where he knew there were valiant warriors. The men of the city came out and fought with Joab, and some of the servants of David among the people fell. Uriah the Hittite was killed as well. Then Joab sent and told David all the news about the fighting, and he instructed the messenger, when you have finished telling the king all the news about the fighting, then if the king's anger rises, and if he says to you, why did you go so near the city to fight? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? Joab here is complicit in David's plan. So Joab is just as much at fault as David is. And his character is taking shape. Remember, he was the one who immediately jumped to conclusions when Abner came to seek peace with David. And he chases after Abner and kills him, saying, hey, I want to talk. And they walk off together and he stabs him. So, yeah, Joab, we're starting to see Joab's character really develop here.
And Joab is one of the chosen 30.
Joab is one of the 30, but he's also the commander of all the armies. Okay.
So David was the mob boss and Joab was one of the made men, the first officer. Okay.
Yeah, we're watching The Sopranos play out right here. This is still the message from Joab. Who killed Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal? Did not a woman throw up a millstone on him from the wall so that he died at Thebez? Why did you go so near the wall? Then you shall say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead too. So if David, what he's asking is, if David says something like this, then mention that Uriah is dead too. Right. The story of Abimelech is there in Judges 9. Abimelech, one of the judges, goes out into battle for the Lord, but he gets too close to a wall, and a lady standing, on the wall throws a millstone over and kills him. So that's the story there. Yeah. Killed by millstone. Yeah. So the messenger went and came and told David all that Joab had sent to tell him. The messenger said to David, the men gained an advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we drove them back to the entrance of the gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall. Some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. So he jumps the gun. He doesn't wait for David to respond. He just blurts it out. So David said to the messenger, thus you shall say to Joab, not let this matter trouble you, for the sword devours now one and now another. Press your attack on the city and overthrow it and encourage them. You have done well, Joab. That's basically what go back, tell Joab you've done well. Don't worry about it.
She's the consequence.
Don't worry about it, right? When the wife of Uriah, Bathsheba, heard that her husband was dead, she made lamentation for him. When the mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife and bore him a son. But the thing that David had done displeased the Lord. Chapter 12. And the Lord sent Nathan to David. He came to him and said to him, there were two men in a certain city, the one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing but one little ewe lamb, which he had bought. He brought it up and it grew with him and with his children. He used to eat of his meager fare and drink from his cup and lie in his bosom, and it was like a daughter to him. Now there came a traveler to the rich man, and he was loath to take one of his own flock or herd and prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. But he took the poor man's lamb and prepared that for the guest who had come to him. So Nathan has been sent by the Lord as a test of observation and integrity. I wonder how David's going to score. Then David's anger was greatly kindled against the man. He said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, the man who has done this deserves to die. He shall restore the lamb fourfold because he did this thing, and because he had no pity." Well, David fails the test of observation. We still got the test of integrity to go. Nathan said to David, "You are the man. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, I anointed you king over Israel, and I rescued you from the hand of Saul. I gave you your master's house and your master's wives into your bosom, and gave you the house of Israel and of Judah. And if that had been too little, I would have added as much more. Why have you despised the word of the Lord to do what is evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword, really with a arrow, anyway, and have taken his wife to be your wife, and have killed him with the sword of the Ammonites. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house, for you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife." Never is a big word. Right here in 10. Now therefore the sword shall never depart from your house. This is part of the covenant that God made with David, that his line would carry on forever. But with this, I won't say additional covenant, but when it goes with that, I will curse those who curse you, kind of thing. That things aren't going to be easy for David or his descendants from now. There's always going to be war. Thus says the Lord, I will raise up trouble against you from within your own house, and I will take your wives before your eye. Now, from your own house, when we get into a few stories here, maybe next week after, Absalom. You hear that, okay? From within your own house, I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor. You shall lie with your wives in the sight of this very sun, for you did it secretly. But I will do this thing before all Israel and before this. This means it's going to happen in the season. So, okay, we got a Psalm 51 that applies to this. If someone, I asked Theodora to read it if she had.
Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love, according to your great mercy. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity, cleanse me from my sins. For I know my transgressions and my sins ever before me. Against you, you alone have I sinned, and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified in your sins, and blameless when you pass judgment. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner from my mother's conceived me. You desire truth and inward being. Therefore, teach me wisdom in the secret heart. In my secret heart, purge me with thy self, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me get joy and gladness, let the bone that you have touched rejoice. Hide your face from my sins, and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, God, put in you a right spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain in me a willing spirit.
Okay. Did that have a byline or title? Oh, it continues on. It continues on.
Oh, okay. Then I will teach transgressors your ways, and sinners will return to you. Deliver me from bloodshed, O God. O God of my salvation, and my tongue will sing aloud of your deliverance. O Lord, may my lips and my mouth declare your praise. For you have no delight in sacrifice. If I were to give a burnt offering, you will not be pleased. Sacrifice acceptable to God is a broken spirit, and broken a contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. Do good to Zion, your good pleasure. You build the walls of Jerusalem. Then you will delight me by sacrifices and burnt offerings and cold offerings. Their bulls will be offered on the altar.
Okay. Okay, so the byline for this was a Psalm of David when the prophet Nathan came to him after he'd gone in. So,
And Nathan is a
priest. Some say prophet, but he was priest. David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Nathan said to David, now the Lord has put away your sin, and you shall not die. Nevertheless, because of this deed, you have utterly scorned the Lord. The child that is born to you shall die. And Nathan went to his house. So David failed the test of integrity too, but he was given a chance to retest, and he passed. However, he had to accept the lowest passing grade. In this case, strife against family and the loss of child being carried by Bathsheba. It's very, this gets very interesting now. The Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David and became very ill. David therefore pleaded with God for the child. David fasted and went in and lay all night on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him, urging him to rise from the ground, but he would not, nor did he eat food with them. On the seventh day, the child died. And the servants of David were afraid to tell him that the child was dead, for they said, while the child was still alive, we spoke to him and he did not listen to us. Talk about David. How then can we tell him the child is dead? He may do himself some harm. But when David saw that his servants were whispering together, he perceived that the child was dead. And David said to his servants, is the child dead? They said, he is dead. 7 days, that's the amount of time for Bathsheba to be made clean after giving birth. But remember what happens on the 8th day in Jewish tradition. That's when the child is named and presented to the temple. So this happened the day before the child was consecrated and given a name. So this baby dies nameless.
Oh.
The child will only be known by God. So, part of the story you don't realize, right? Then David rose from the ground, washed, anointed himself, and changed his clothes. Anointed in this case is not a religious thing per se. It's they used oil to kind of make himself waterproof to keep him clean. And changed his clothes. He went into the house of the Lord and worshipped. He then went to his own house. When he asked, they set food before him and he ate. Then his servants said to him, what is this thing you have done? You fasted and wept for the child while it was alive. When the child died, you rose and ate food. He said, while the child was still alive, I fasted and wept. For I said, who knows? The Lord may be gracious to me and the child may live. But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. This event affected David so much, he set about starting over. The fasting period died with the death of the child. So, now we see kind of a connection between the death of Uriah and the death of his child. In that, in both responses, the first one, the death of Uriah, he tells Joab, don't worry about it. This happens. Well, he's having to live with that too, with the understanding that, children die. And but it's taken on a whole new meaning for him now. So, these story writers, man, they really have it going on, don't they? Don't realize these things.
You said he told Uriah.
He told Joab.
Okay.
Did I say I didn't? He told you. Okay. Then David consoled his wife Bathsheba and went to her and lay with her, and she bore a son, and he named him Solomon. The Lord loved him and sent a message by the prophet Nathan. This says prophet now. Said priest earlier. So he named him Jedediah because of the Lord. So who we know as Solomon, that's his kind of his Arabic name, if you will.
What does Solomon mean? I wonder.
Well, it means when we look at Proverbs, we hear the name of woman, which is Shulam or Shulamite or whatever. Shulamite, Solomon, they come from the same root, meaning beautiful. But Jedediah is David's son's name. Solomon is just his Arabic name, if you will. And of course, we know Jedediah would eventually acquire wealth and renown and would pack up his truck and move to Beverly Hills. So next week, we hear about Amnon, the family menace. These are all references to Star Wars, by the way. Amnon, the family menace, Revenge of the Sister, Return of the Son.
Well, we had Jedi.
Yeah. Well, Jedediah, I was thinking Uncle Jed.
I know Uncle Jed, but Jedi.
And I think in the first episode, it actually mentions Jedediah. Anyway. So, let me stop the share here. Any questions?
I
We
just thought it
learned.
was interesting that during those 7 days, David never goes to see the child or the mother.
Interesting, huh?
Is that the way it's supposed to be? Not
Well-
coming clean.
I would say that it probably had to do with purification. Although when, if we, the other time where it's mentioned is the birth of Jesus. And when they take him on the 8th day, Joseph goes with him. We don't know what happened in that first 7 days, other than shepherds coming. But Joseph was with Mary during that whole time.
But David is praying hard.
Yes.
Not.
And remember the first thing he did after he cleaned himself up, he went to the temple. And of course, we heard in the Psalm 51 that sacrifices take on a whole new meaning. Because it's not physical sacrifice that we make that purifies us, it's the sacrifice of the heart that purifies us.
No, and then he doesn't go to Bathsheba after he's been to the purified, he goes to the temple.
Well, he really can't go.
Right, without making himself hungry. But, yeah, I would say it may have probably had to do with that. The child is with her, plus the child is sick.
Yeah.
And they may, they don't know, I mean, they didn't have any idea of what germ theory was, but they did recognize that when people were sick, you didn't go near them. I mean, that's, every time it mentions leprosy, that's what happened, they sent them away. Even though it probably wasn't leprosy, but, yeah, there's a lot of things that could be going on, but more than likely it was probably, accepted.
You have to think about what was customary in that time, not our custom.
Well, any other questions? I added that phrase, the millstone, to one of my prayers. Things. In fact, I think it's the benediction.
Did the story of David give us hope?
Of course,
That's good.
always.
Yeah.
Second chances,
Yes.
third chances. In just today, he has broken 6 of the 10 commandments.
And he made
Right.
says he's a man after God's own heart.
So, I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off. Say bye.